My story started May 12th, 2015, on a really ordinary day. It was an ordinary business trip, and I was taking the train back home to New Jersey. I stood up just outside the station stop in Philadelphia, and I reached up to grab something in the luggage rack above my seat. And I held onto the rack as the train started rocking, and that's the last thing I remember. I would later find out that the train had derailed going 106 miles an hour on a curve designed for a maximum of 50. I woke up in the hospital several days later on a ventilator in the ICU. Almost every major organ in my abdomen and my chest was severely damaged. My pelvis was broken in half and shattered. My ribs were shattered. I'd broken my neck and my lower back. The doctors have told me many times that I was not expected to live. Throughout my journey, there were so many incredible acts of compassion. I was in the hospital for a long time. In the beginning, I was on a ventilator. I couldn't speak. I was immobilized and I couldn't move. And the nurses who were at my side all day long, every day, every night, holding my hand, the appreciation that I have for them. And not just for the compassion they showed to me, but the compassion they showed to my family. They were there when I coded and had to be resuscitated. And through all of that, there was always a nurse, not just holding my hand, not just taking care of me, but with her arm around my mother, explaining to my children what was happening and why it was going to be okay. On the night of the accident, I texted my husband, leaving Philly, home soon. He sat at home looking at his iPhone, and a news alert popped up a few minutes later. He would spend the next 9 hours driving to the accident site, driving to the Family Assistance Center, driving to almost every hospital in Philadelphia, looking for a Jane Doe. During those nightmarish hours, the compassion of strangers, the kindness and the true good-heartedness of humanity, indeed, I feel like shone through in so many different ways. I wasn't there, of course, but there were nurses that would help my husband and direct him to the next hospital and make phone calls for him. There were receptionists that answered my children's call and tried to see what they could do to help the stranger on the other side of the line. And that kindness, that compassion truly got my husband through until finally around daybreak, he learned at the very last hospital on the list that there was indeed a Jane Doe in surgery that hadn't been identified. It didn't occur to me that I would face challenges with my mental health. My physical injuries were so overwhelming that was simply the furthest thing from my mind. I had an appointment with my trauma surgeon, and she said to me, "How are you doing?" And I started to talk about my pain. I started to talk about what I could do or couldn't do. I was still in my wheelchair. And she said, no. How are you doing? And I realized I didn't know the answer. I burst into tears. And I looked at her and I said, I don't know. My trauma surgeon said to me, I recommend that all of my trauma patients seek counseling for PTSD. This was an accident. Accidents happen. I know that. And I'll be fine. I'm just sad now because I'm in pain. And she looked at me and knowingly and very gently. And she said, well, just keep it in mind. And it took about another month or two of unexplained crying, of being awake all night and unable to wake up all day long, of screaming at my kids and being terribly irritable with my husband for no reason whatsoever, that I realized I did need help. And I didn't know what to call it, and I didn't understand why it was happening, but I really couldn't deny it any longer. And I found professional help. I found a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma recovery. And I started to understand the profound connection between our physical body and our mental health. All throughout my recovery, I was amazed and so appreciative, really overwhelmed by the compassion of our company's employees, colleagues I'd worked with for years, but also acquaintances that perhaps I'd only met once or only seen the name at the end of an email. And there were hundreds. And I cried. I was so overwhelmed. And it really brought home to me the character of our company. We're not just a great company. We truly are a company that cares. And I felt that in every bone of my body. And I am proud to be here. I am proud to be back at work because we didn't think that was going to happen. I am proud to be an active mom for my 3 teenage boys, the kind of mom I wanted to be. I will never be the same, and I know that. I still face health challenges, and I always will. But I live with joy. I take pride in what I'm doing. I take joy in the people around me. And I take joy in reaching out to others that might find themselves in a situation like me on an ordinary day, waking up to something that changes their lives and turns everything they knew upside down. And to the extent I can be a resource for them, as so many were for me, that makes me happy.